Hi, and welcome to the Unhinged History Podcast, the podcast where two compulsive nut jobs are going to mainline the spooky stories that we have been regaling our family members, neighbors, and the Amazon delivery man with. And now we have finally joined forces to tell each other the story, and we hope at least some of the details won't be known to the other host. I'm host one, I'm Theresa.
I'm host two, and I'm Angie. And I don't know about you, but it's also been the Uber Eats delivery driver that we've been regaling all our information to.
They might have notes on us. Some people have just leave at door. On our profile, it is leave at door and run.
Just leave at
This
the end of the
this
street.
this person will talk your ear off. You really don't want to know of the great spaghetti hoax of 18 or 1957. You don't want to know it. So just flee. Head
Or
for the hills.
maybe you do.
You think you do, but then you get to hear about the Northwest butter crimes. And it just leads fluidly
It's a
in
whole
into
thing.
a line of female aviators that you didn't know you didn't need to know about. And now you're thinking, I just want a World War II story and I want to go home.
And where's my grandpa? All at
Facts.
once.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So these are
We have
things.
skills.
I mean, do we?
Yeah. Because
Okay.
we can connect all of those. Do you see what you did? You connected everything to World War II in such a beautiful way.
For my next trick.
She'll be here all week, folks.
Hmm. You may want me to
Mm,
leave.
hmm You won't. She'll regale you with greatness. What are you drinking?
Uh, a black raspberry LaCroix.
Mm.
I know it looks so much more fancy when you just like, no, she's just a basic millennial.
I mean,
Um,
I'm drinking water, so here we are.
or I mean, look, it comes in a cute thing. You've got a straw, you're winning.
And it's a glass cup because
Girl,
sustainability.
I
I know
mean,
how you
I'm from
feel about glass
Portland.
Tupperware.
I mean, yeah, I did upgrade because I could not be that person knowing that you were.
Couldn't be the margarine container anymore.
I mean, look, I mean, I will use a plastic bag over and over again just because I can, almost as if I am channeling Nana, who, would clean them up, string them out, and dry them out.
God bless her.
Facts.
hmm
I realize I think it's my turn to go first. I had to pull up the list. So thank you for dealing
I
with
think it
me as
is.
I stalled. Um,
And even if it wasn't, I insist you go first because I really want to hear your
oh,
story.
okay. So
I'll fight you.
I'm going to tell you about what's colloquially known as the Ghostbuster ruling. Yeah,
What?
eyebrow raises. Okay. Okay. No problem. No problem. I'm here to solve the questions that I have just put into your brain through Jedi
Okay.
mind trickery. My sources, the heanonline.org blog, they have Something Strange in the Neighborhood, The Ghostbusters Ruling by Tara Kibler, the Toronto Star. Inside the spooky dream home, this $1.85 million mansion was the focus of the 1991 Ghostbusters ruling. House Beautiful, how this Victorian home became America's first legally haunted house, and what that actually means,
Okay.
by Hadley Mendelson, and Reader's Digest, Our Haunted House on the Hudson, by Helen Herdman Ackley.
Okay.
I had some fun. Um,
It
Le-
looks like you did.
Levita Place, and remind me to share with you the Zillow listing in a bit, is
Okay.
a especially coveted cul-de-sac in the commuter town of Nyack, which is north of New York by like 60 kilometers. So it is a bedroom
Okay.
community. It was This house was built in 1890. It's a three-story clapboard Victorian at number one. It is constructed of horizontal wood paneling. It's set back behind a front lawn and it's elevated above the river, the Hudson, right? It's got gorgeous views from almost every window. It
And it's
features
house number one on the street?
Uh-huh. Made in
Oh,
1890.
wow.
It's a Victorian.
Okay.
It has a charming turret. a picturesque wraparound porch, and a fenced-in pool.
Okay.
Okay. Inside, there's 8 bedrooms and 4.5 baths. And despite its spaciousness, the home was designed to feel homely and comforting. It's got nooks, like reading nooks and things like that. It's got intimately smaller spaces carved out of the larger rooms all throughout. Now, some of these little period details include stained glass windows, hardwood floors, and elaborate moldings. Little's
Okay.
known about the early occupants, although there's interviews with local residents, and it was likely home to a family that's still in the area until it went unoccupied for about a decade in the 1960s.
Okay.
Okay. And this is where main character energy, George and Helen Ackley, a married couple coming in for a spacious waterfront home for themselves, and they've got 4 kids. What they didn't
Yeah,
know,
this sounds like this is the fam. This was when Kevin McAllister's parents were picking a house.
yeah, think that energy, okay? There's legends about this house and about it being haunted, and it's circled the community for years.
Okay.
Now, the couple buys this home, and their initial joy is met with caution from all the locals. There's fear in their eyes, and the neighborhood children are offering them warnings.
The neighborhood
Yeah.
children.
Hmm.
Like my daddy says, you don't go to that house after sundown.
Yeah.
Okay.
You keep your eyes open as you walk past and you don't look in the upstairs windows kind of deals.
Okay.
Now, it doesn't take long. George and Helen, they discover these poltergeists themselves. And true to tale, the family begins to hear things like phantom footsteps, mysterious knockings, slamming doors, and this is all throughout the house. And they believe the house is inhabited not by one, but 3 ghosts. They have the unnamed Navy lieutenant from the from the American Revolution, a married couple from the 18th century, George and Lady Margaret. And then, according to the Ackley family, a number of strange happenings occurred over the next 20 years. I do want to circle back.
Okay.
I know we all get screwy on timelines. They say one of the ghosts is a Navy lieutenant from the American Revolution, and the house was built in 1890. I th-
As we know, ghosts can haunt a property.
so he's just chilling on the top of a hill, waiting for it to be built.
And the house was built, and now he's haunting that. Like he was formerly haunting the hill, and now he's haunting the house the hill was built
So
on.
that was the hill he chose to die on.
Yes. Literally and physically. Yes.
Okay. I didn't write that into my notes. That just came to me. Um, so some of the crazy things that happen, Helen's children and grandchildren begin to receive odd gifts like rings, dinnerware, coins, trinkety things. And then later the objects vanish entirely. Okay. One morning, Helen's daughter Cynthia is woken violently by shaking of her bed. And this ritual occurs most mornings afterwards until Cynthia is just like it's or Christmas break. She just wants to sleep in. She doesn't have to get up. And so she announces to the ghost that it was spring break, that she's on spring break and she just wants to sleep in. And then the ghosts knock it off.
Okay.
So they respond well to correction and feedback. Maybe so say we all.
Constructive criticism.
I mean, look, I like when anybody can learn from a mistake.
Yeah. Listen, can
And
you also bring up the ice cream when he
would
comes to the
you
floor?
please? Or actually, you know how you can just lower the temperature of a room? Can you just do the front porch? Instacart dropped
That'd be
off the
great.
order and I'm still in the bath.
Can you please? I'm here for it.
Help a girl out. Now, that Sir George, he ends up popping into the picture one day. He's midair watching Helen paint the ceiling of the living room. And according to Helen, he approves of the color and kind of disappears.
Okay. I so far these are seeming like ghosts you want to have as roommates.
I mean, truly, they're not drinking all of your milk, eating all of your
Mm.
food, leaving the
One's just
back
trying to get you
door.
to school on time.
Right. I'm okay with
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
So Cynthia's fiance, the one who gets shaken awake, Mark, he wakes up to see Lady Margaret leaning over him as he sleeps. And I'm like, absolutely not. No, we're not
Yeah.
playing that. I have
Agreed.
a
Okay.
hard time with hubs hovering while I'm sleeping. It's like, unless you're going to put a pillow over my head and hold it down firmly and commit to the
What
bit,
are you doing?
back up.
I will headbutt. I've been
Yeah,
known.
right. Like
Yeah.
either end it with prejudice or change what you're doing
Hmm.
immediately. Now, a decade into living with all these ghosts, this is when Helen decides to write about her family's paranormal experiences. She starts submitting her stories to like the Reader's Digest and local papers. And she does this at least three
Okay.
times. Now,
Okay, because we didn't
unfortunately,
we didn't have social media back then, so here we
right. I
are.
mean, but I remember reading Reader's Digest. Like that was the
Hmm.
thing,
Oh yeah.
like countless hours wasted to those little books. So, right after her first submission, her husband, George, dies of a heart attack. Not Sir George,
Oh no.
hubby George. And it's in the mid 1970s that that article, Our Haunted House on the Hudson, hits the Reader's Digest. And this article, and I got to read it, and it was so cool to kind of see, the photocopy of the article so you could read it like almost like it was the thing, the physical print medium. And she's talking about how she took her kids on a play date, and the kids ask the new residents about living in a haunted house. And she's kind of like, What? What do you mean haunted? Not my house. Later, she describes having a plumber come in and doing some work. And after a while, he kind of asks, are you going to leave soon? Like, are you almost, done? I just finished up work, but are you leaving soon? And she goes, well, I was going to, pick up the kids before Hubs gets home from work. And he kind of acts uncomfortable. She goes, what's up? And he says, well, I kept hearing footsteps going up and down the stairs. And I've ran up those stairs 6 times knowing that we should be the only ones in the house. There's never been anybody there. I'm afraid to leave you home alone. And she
And she's
just,
like, I'm fully confident I'm okay.
yeah, she's like, I've got to learn to be alone in this house sometime, but thank you for your concern.
Yeah, okay.
So she's very kind of cavalier about this haunting. Now, these doors are opening periodically, as I've said earlier, and she says that there's a light in the dining room that's going to sway on windless days. Now, this is one of those things I really want to watch the paranormal home investigator. I really want somebody like this to go through and be like, actually, you've got raccoons and they are having orgies up in the attic, and that's what's causing that wind thing to move. Yeah,
Hmm.
that's actually just because of a draft. You small draft in the
Just
window, and somebody opens
yeah,
the front door and it just slams the doors on the second floor. It's just physics. Sorry about your luck. It's not a ghost.
it's just pork caulking.
Yep. So this is what I want, right? I don't have it. Now, the cool things that she kind of talks about in this article is I'd said some of the gifts. There were a pair of silver tongs that were given to her daughter when the daughter got married. And then there's a golden baby ring that appears when the first grandbaby's born.
Aw.
But again, later, like, other things are like, but the gifts disappear. I'm like, if they are hooking it up with high quality items, they can stay. They're approving my
Yeah.
painting choices. So they're a little
They're
loud from
sending
time to
gifts.
time, right? Like, honestly, I walk
Whatever.
heavy anyhow. I can't complain.
I vacuum at night.
Yeah, you know? So it's the early 90s. Helen decides that, it's time to sell the house. And I'm assuming Hubs died in the 70s when these articles started getting published. So she's probably wanting to downsize because it's a big house.
Oh yeah, right.
And
It's 8 bedrooms, you said, right?
yeah, 8 bedrooms, four bath.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And so
Okay.
she enters into a contract with Jeffrey Stambowski, and the asking price is 650,000 with a
Ugh.
32.5 down payment.
Okay.
Now, hailing from the hustle and bustle of New York City, however, Stambovsky is unaware of the folklore surrounding the house, kind of like she was. Now,
Okay.
she's seemingly cool with her ghosts. Like, they're fine. You and I have talked about it. She seems to be of the same mindset. So she never mentions the hauntings to our dude Jeffrey. But he ends up hearing
Surprise.
about it, and he wants out of the deal. She's not letting him out. She's like, "Thanks for the 32 grand. Escrow closes in 30 days. You'll be getting keys."
That's how it goes.
Jeffrey, he wants out, right? Because she didn't mention the hauntings, and this kind of chaps his hide because he didn't sign. He signed up for a house on the Hudson. He did not sign up for
To
roommates,
be
freeloading
honest,
roommates.
if you if you are buying a house that is markedly aged, you should be expecting something. If it's not ghosts, it's wood floors that need to be repaired or bad electrical. Like
Yeah,
you should just know it's something's on its way.
facts.
Like you can't bow out because you didn't think it was haunted. Haunted should have been your first question.
I mean, we've rewired part of this house. We've redone all of the plumbing internally. These are things.
It's just what you do.
And it's a 104-year-old farmhouse. I mean,
You're gonna have to do something
yeah.
eventually.
I mean, honestly, we're turning this thing into the ship that Theseus built because pretty soon it's going to not be anything stock.
You know, what are you gonna do?
So Stambovsky sues Ackley and the real estate broker because this is fraudulent misinterpretation, and he requests a rescission of the sale. Now, he argues that Helen's stories about this, which may be how he found out, devalued the property. But the court dismisses his complaint and says that Helen didn't have a duty to disclose the haunted house stories to the Stambovskys. The Supreme Court dismissed the action on the caveat, or on caveat emptor, or buyer beware.
And what year was this? I think you said earlier, but I've forgotten the year.
Like 1990. It's either 1990 or
Okay.
91 because in 91, Stambovsky appeals, and that brings it to the New York Supreme Court. And Justin Rubin, he disagrees with the former dismissal and is joined by two other judges to form a majority opinion that the caveat of buyer beware should be set aside in this context because the defect isn't a physical one.
Okay.
Now, by openly promoting the folklore to the press and the community, Helen couldn't deny or change that folklore, was said under oath, right? She's got to own up to what she put in Reader's Digest.
Yeah, that's fair.
Specifically,
Okay.
I mean, like, right, like if you're going to say there's fairy rings in the backyard that open a portal that take you to another land where you dare not eat or drink the food,
There better be fairy rings in the backyard, and if you're gonna say it, you better be prepared for the consequences.
right.
Yeah.
So the court wrote, having reported the ghosts or the presence in both national publication and local press, the defendant is stopped to deny their existence as a matter of law. The house is haunted. You put an article in Reader's
Okay.
Digest saying your house is haunted, it is in fact haunted at that point. Now, sticking to the buyer
Okay.
beware doctrine, the appellate court holds that she's not liable for damages. Instead, due to the fact that haunted, in quotation marks, can't be easily ascertained with a simple home inspection, because again, the paranormal home inspector didn't come onto the scene, the appellate court simply rescinds Stambovsky's contract. You've got the face, make the statement.
It can't be. Did you say, I think I misheard you. Did you say that it can't be proved
Yeah,
or it
like
can be?
cannot. Because it's not like the
Okay.
ghosts are just going to show up in court and be like,
Right, right,
boo,
right. Ah,
right? And so it's like, how do you prove it?
gotcha.
How do you prove it?
I'm picking up what you're putting down.
Yeah. They did say, hey, look, we'll let you out of the contract. We won't make you finish buying the house, but you'll have to forfeit the down payment. And he basically says, goodbye, and just disappears into the ether. 32 grand to not live in Casper's home is worth it.
Okay.
Now, this house in question, the Ackley House, is located at 1 Levita Place in Nyack, New York. That house
Okay.
is the one that is referred to as the Ghostbuster ruling. And there was a legal scholar named Eric Goldman, and he explains that Helen owned the Stambowskis the same level promotional effort because of her conduct before the litigation. So he doesn't believe that the court's setting a new precedent. They're not doing anything novel or crazy. That the judge is really just looking as this as like a one-off ruling. They're trying to come up with a solution that makes it equitable to everybody involved. He's like, look,
Okay. That makes sense.
this isn't going to be something I hope I see 5 times a year. Let's try to come up with something that
Right.
everybody can succeed with. Now, it is interesting because Eric Goldman kind of teaches courses on law, and he's saying that the concept of having, basically this buyer beware thing makes it one of the top most remarkable statements that they've ever seen a court made. Because again, courts aren't going to show up in a judge in a courtroom and be like, howdy. So there's no way to prove that they do or do not exist, but you just have to go off of what the owner has written about the home previously. Now, he
So
stresses
had she
gold.
not released these articles, this probably wouldn't have been even a thing.
No, no. And then he would have bought a home. The locals would have given him the weird looks, and the kids would have sang the really creepy songs as they just skipped rope in front of the house, but nothing would have happened.
So really what I'm hearing here is just the neighbors are making it creepy.
Really, what you should be taking away from this is don't write it down.
I can't say that because I'm always saying it's not science if you don't document it.
Then this isn't science because we got to think about the resale.
Okay.
Now, I guess what I will say that was kind of really awesome to hear is that, after I should back up. So after Helen loses the thing, Jeffrey backs out of the sale. The house ends up getting quite a bit of publicity and selling super quickly. So it ended up really
Okay, that
helping
makes
her,
sense.
because now everyone's like, "Oh, I want to live in a haunted house. These ghosts don't seem that bad. I can deal with golden rings and a shut
I
door
can
from time
fix
to
them.
time." Yeah, I can fix them. Yeah, of course you can, Karen. Um, Now he's all like Goldman when we think about the Ghostbusters ruling. When Golden thinks about laws and things, he thinks that it would happen differently nowadays because we live in a digital age, and so there's so much more access to information. It would be
Right,
harder to assume Stambovsky didn't have an idea, whereas you could argue maybe he just didn't sit down at the right restroom with the stack of Reader's Digests and have access to that particular article.
right. But today
So,
you can Google anything you want on your house.
oh my gosh, yes. You can see all
Yeah,
of the
so
horrible
yeah.
paint choices that have been made throughout the years.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you can.
Now, since that house has sold, it's had some noticeable residents, people who've lived there since. There's been film director Adam Brooks, single
Okay.
singer Ingrid Michaelson, and singer rapper Mattis Yahoo. I don't know who that is. I should have really listened to some of their stuff so I would know who they are. But years after she sold the house to someone else, Ackley, who died in Florida in 2003, is said to have reconnected with the specters through a paranormal researcher and channeler. And this is according to her son in law, Mark, the one that was stared at by one of the ghosts. Now, I guess based on that interaction that she had with the ghost afterwards, she found out that after her and the family moved out 30 years ago, the three Phantoms also vacated because the new owners, they're not entertaining. So they just skedaddled because it wasn't fun.
They bounced.
Yeah,
We're
they were
out.
like, yeah, they don't really
They
consult
made
us
poor
about paint
painting
colors.
choices.
Their plumbers weren't as fidgety and nervous. So we just no fun.
Hmm. We locked the doors, no one cared.
Yeah, it was kind of lame. They just walked around with the keys and then just didn't say anything. Now there is a realtor named Nancy Blake Weber, and she's sold the house like several times. And she has said that I have not, nor have I heard of subsequent owners experiencing anything unusual. To me, the house feels warm and welcoming. It's a beloved house of all the owners who live there. The house is a perfectly restored beauty to nurture the creative spirit with its soft light, spacious interior, spacious yet intimate interiors and Hudson River views. It's just like,
Hmm.
holy crap. So, because I feel like if you're going to do a story like this, you need to be able to have pics or it didn't happen. So, I'm going to
Yeah.
share the Zillow listing.
Okay, I'm so excited because I need to know. I have questions, so I need to see them.
Mhm. So, that is the wraparound porch with the view of the Hudson.
It is
That is,
beautiful. Oh, wow.
mhm,
Okay.
yeah, it's not
It's
a little
gorgeous.
home.
It's at least 3 stories.
Yep.
Look at the blue front doors.
I know the
Okay.
front
Yep.
doors are TARDIS
Dreamy.
blue.
Yeah, they are. Oh my gosh. The woodwork on in the foyer, like that you walk into a fireplace that looks like it was probably redone in the 20s. Like it has that kind of stone and woodwork
Yep.
around it. And then beautiful stairs. The floor is gorgeous. I'm in heaven. Hmm.
I mean, just all of
Oh,
the bespoke stuff. But they really did a lot to open
yep.
this place up and really
It's
kind of,
gorgeous.
yeah. I mean, multiple fireplaces throughout
What?
this thing.
Yeah. Oh, look at the book wall. I'm here for it.
Hmm.
You can
Hmm.
see it's got pocket French doors as you would expect.
Oh,
They've
you would
they've
hope.
currently
Yeah.
got it decorated like mid-century, but it is absolutely gorgeous. Like it really fits with the space.
Yep. The dining
Oh,
room is
well,
just stunning.
I love that there's a couch in the window. It's like a bay window, but instead of the cushions, it's a full couch in the bay in the sitting like in the dining area, and it
Yep.
is absolutely stunning. Hmm. Okay,
Built-ins throughout. I mean,
everywhere.
yep.
Oh my gosh, that kitchen is dreamy. I want a kitchen so bad with one brick wall.
I know. I know. And it's not
It's
even a
beautiful.
brick wall. It is the back of a fireplace, which makes it even better.
Hmm.
The staircase with the stained glass windows and the ornate railings. Could you even?
Honestly, I wouldn't have moved. Yeah, nope. Well, oh, look at that. Yep, guys, this house is gorgeous.
So for those wanting to play at home, it's one La Vida Place, Nyack, New York. Have at
I
it.
feel like we should put the Zillow link in the show notes.
We should. We really should.
It is
Because,
gorgeous. And I'm gonna keep the ghosts. I'm just saying, like,
right.
yeah.
But that is the story of the house that prompted the Ghostbuster ruling.
I love that that's a thing. That just made my entire day. And you expect a story from me now.
I mean, honestly,
But
you do you. I don't want to
uh,
force you into anything.
but I am currently mentally moving into a house on the Hudson. So there's that. Um, wow, you know what? There is absolutely no way to gently segue from your story to mine, so we're just gonna take a serious left-hand turn.
Fantastic.
Um, are you at all familiar with the story of Arnold Paole?
No.
Okay.
But the way you say that, it's like
So,
I should be, and I need to go
well,
smack some heads of some educators who've done me wrong.
no, it's kind of new to me too, and I think I mostly just asked because this is in my opinion, a really unique story. And for me, the reason that it is because it has its element of the far-fetched and the paranormal, but it happens in a place and a time that we have spoken about several times throughout our previous stories.
World War II.
So, no, actually, World War II is not involved at all. Um, but think like the area of the world, the Battle of Cransby's.
Okay.
and Frederick the Great, right? So this, I don't know why, but for me, this story is special because it takes something that is so wild and so fanciful, but puts it in a context that we're very familiar with. So it's weird, like my brain can't reconcile that. Like it was easier for me to accept the story of like Samhain being this mystical and really special event that happens because for some reason my brain separates out like that being almost an otherworldly event, whereas this paranormal story fits firmly in the heart of other stories we're very familiar with.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm following. I'm picking up what you're throwing down.
Okay. Oh, fantastic. So with that being said, my sources are a article from medium.com, The Story of Arnold Paole by Tiana Warfield. Um, a YouTube called The Chilling Legacy of Arnold Paole, history's most famous vampire. I wouldn't say he's history's most famous vampire, but I would definitely say he's up there. Um, skyhistory.uk has a really great article called Three Real People Behind the Modern Vampire Myth, and it includes people like Vlad Tempest and, um, other people we've actually spoken about
Right.
in a serious manner. Um, Smithsonian article called Decomposing Bodies in the 1720s gave birth to the first vampire panic. And a
In
monstrous.com
what year?
article called the 1720s.
Oh, 1720s. Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Are you going to cover the New England Vampire Panic?
No, I'm nowhere near New England.
Okay, good. Because I was about to say, like, I did cover that.
Yeah, no,
But
I'm nowhere near
Michael
England.
Palais does not ring a bell. So carry on.
Well, good because his name is Arnold. So so
It's
we're
just proof
already
I was
ahead of the
paying
game.
attention.
Anyway, um I actually was a little bit panicked that I wasn't going to be able to give you enough of a story here, but I actually believe it or not was able to get quite a bit. So, with all that to do, Serbia, picture it. The area where Mr. Palais was born sits north of Istanbul, which as we know was once called Constantinople. And I actually cannot help myself. I have to say that almost every time I say Istanbul. Like it's just a part of who I am. So anyway, Serbia's north of Istanbul, southeast of Croatia, directly above Greece and Bulgaria, and sort of southwest of the Romanian region. So this geographically is an area with a ton of really proud, long-living legends and history. And we've had a lot of stories that have taken place in this region and a lot of stories or some stories around the same time frame. So it was just really interesting to see the two. So anyway, Pele, he's born sometime around the year 1700 in a small village in what is today modern day Serbia. There's a bit of contention as to the exact location of his village. So for the sake of my story, I'm just going to go with the generally agreed upon being Medvagia. Hopefully I'm doing my best to pronounce everything exactly as I heard it and learned it, but please forgive me if I do not. So by 1718, the Austrian Empire has annexed most of Serbia from the Ottomans. Most of Pale's life in it's spent with this area under Austrian control. In fact, the area would remain as such until the Treaty of Belgrade in 1739, at which point the Turks they take control of the area. Um, and at this point, you're probably like, Angie, you promised me a somewhat spooky story, not a story, not a geography lesson, but I promise it's going to matter in just a little bit. For like 20 years, the Habsburgs are running the show directly from Vienna. So like keep that back there in your noodle noggin, as you would say.
Okay.
And it kind of goes without saying, per some of our other stories, like I said, this area is war torn. They're dealing with a lot of fallout from that, and just kind of couple that with like the inherent superstition of the region and the general living conditions of a lot of the people in this region. Um, because I think that that helps kind of understand some of their actions, I think. Interesting though, because of the background of these people, the area is not what I would have thought it was. It's mostly small nomadic groups who actually have a focus on cattle over anything else. Like there isn't like that's their main source of economy is cattle. And I don't know why, but my brain had a really hard time picturing that. Now, Austria is looking at this and they're sort of looking for a way to boost the economy, and so they excuse me, they recruit militiamen. They are called Haduks, and that might be one of the funnest words I've ever had to say. I made my husband say it several times just so he could get how fun it was. And these guys, they're basically their job is border patrol. They're paid to protect the borders and serve with the regulars during wartime. And then in promise, the empire basically states that they'll, after their service is done, they'll give the Hajduk's land. One of these fellows is our guy, Arnold Paole. Now, here's where his story gets a little less normal and a little bit more weird. It's roughly 1727. He's just returned home from his military service in or around Greece. He's not home in his village long before he tells his wife that while serving, he was harassed or attacked by what he thought was a vampire. He said, though, that he had fought him off and eventually killed him. Pele goes on to say that he also had to rid himself of the vampire and his curse by, quote, finding its grave, then eating soil from it while smearing the vampire's blood all over himself.
Perfectly natural, perfectly healthy.
Perfect, right? He goes on to say that he also burned the body of the attacker, thus sufficiently solving all his problems, or so he thought.
Or getting rid of evidence.
Supposedly, I mean, solving problems, I guess. He also supposedly bragged about drinking the fiend's blood. Now we know from our modern day understanding, books, movies, TV, that's exactly how you become a vampire.
Yeah, he was really
But I
just going
guess,
through the playbook.
I mean, really, like the minute, yeah, anyway,
He forswore
regardless,
garlic to as he kicked everything off too. But hey,
yeah, I mean, what are you gonna do, right? So he, despite the fact that he's kind of bragged about these things and he's kind of told the whole village that he's done these things, he still really can't shake the feeling that he's been cursed. Whether that curse means he's going to face an early death or something completely different, he still feels off. Anyway, not long goes by before he falls off his hay wagon, and as one source says, he shatters his neck.
oof.
Another source says he simply lands on his head. Either way, he's within a few days he succumbs to his wounds. And by this point, it's not later than 1728. So to me, like this is already just an absolute recipe for a disaster, no matter what. Like all of these things coupled together, I think are just going to spell some sort of superstitious problem amongst the other villagers because of the things he's already said, right? But not long after he's buried, strange things start happening about the village. People report seeing him around town and even in their homes. What's weirder is that supposedly the people who said that they had seen him all die, like very shortly after. Not like wild deaths or like, you know, neck mark vampire deaths. They just die.
So he's just the harbinger of death.
You could say that, yeah.
Okay.
Um, what's even weirder is that of the four villagers who said they saw him, also said that Pele visited them, harassed them, or even plagued them. So, like, 40 days after all this starts happening, the villagers are spooked, and rightfully so. I mean, they remember what Paole was saying just before he died, right? Like, I drank the vampire's blood and I speared it all over myself and I dug around in the dirt at his grave and then I burned him. Like, they remember this vividly.
I mean, because that's just weird ass things to say.
Right? And I'm getting the image that he wasn't the type to just kind of mutter it under his breath. I feel like
Oh
that's
no,
such
loud
a
and
common
proud on a
part of the
bar
story.
stool.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was gonna go. So villagers decide that the only thing that needs to happen is that he needs to be dug up. Officers are summoned from Belgrade and he is exhumed. Now, what they find inside Palais' coffin is his corpse. It's fresh. It's not decomposed. His body's
What
not
time of
showing the
year?
normal signs. It doesn't specifically say, but I'm
Okay,
going to
because
assume that this area is cooler
winter.
anyway,
Right.
right?
And I'm going to assume they don't have body farms, so they don't necessarily fully understand decomposition under a number of circumstances
Yeah. So they go on. So there's no normal signs of decay. The burial looks relatively normal. There's no shriveling, but he is supposedly off to one side of his grave, not where you'd expect someone that can't move by itself to be. But anyway, there he is. It's also said there's fresh blood coming from his eyes, nose, mouth, and ears.
because of normal decomposition.
Right. But we don't know that in 1728. Um, Not only this, but his hair and nails and beard had all noticeably grown. Now,
Because
what
of
we
the
know,
receding hairline
you're right,
and skin, because
like
of,
how it shrinks and moves and all that, we know that now, but again, that's not something that's common knowledge then.
yeah, it's not normal
Also,
decomposition, but allow us to cite several examples of standard
of
decomposition.
normal,
Yeah.
right, exactly. Maybe it's a little less because it is already 40 days past his burial, but still, like, I'm thinking it's probably not 100 degrees outside. So
Yeah.
we're dealing with that. Um, so we have all of those things, and we couple that with the fact that his shroud, his shirt, and the inside of his coffin is also covered in blood. It's said that his lips and his cheeks still have color.
Okay.
Now, right, as there's no real explanation for this at the time, his corpse is immediately declared vampire on the spot. Paole is surrounded by garlic and, according to legend, staked immediately. Purportedly, he screams and proceeds to gush out mass amounts of blood.
I'm willing to bet that was probably just air escaping out his windpipe.
I am also willing to bet that it was some sort of like gas reaction when you,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? I don't think you're wrong. Then of course the villagers they chop off his head and they burn his body, but you know,
Oh, so that reminds me, I did learn something recently that was fairly frightening. I didn't substantiate it, so this could be fake, but burning funeral pyre, the way I want to go. Apparently,
facts.
when you're laid out and then fire comes, it causes your tendons to contract, right? So if you don't use large stones to lay on like the chest or things like that, the person who is lying in state, who is, burning, will sit up,
No,
which that's frightening. So if they don't know about
you
this,
know
they
they
now
never
have
show
this
that
guy
in the
sitting
movie.
up because that would really play into this vampire lore. If we're burning somebody as a vampire and they sit up, and I'm at this point, you won't be able to see, but their eyes are looking at you. Prove me wrong.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, now I'm not gonna sleep tonight, so thanks for that. I'm gonna have to rewatch every scene I've ever watched of a beautiful Viking burial, so thanks for that.
You're welcome. I'm a menace.
You're out here doing your work. What can I say? Um, uh, Afterwards, the villagers, just for good measure, they do this 4 more times with the other dead.
Okay.
Just
They're not
just for
burning
good
him four
measure.
more times, but they're just going after the most recently
The
buried.
the four additional people who said we saw him He harassed us, and then they die. They do it with them.
The ones that got
Okay.
to hear 7 days till you die.
Yes, those ones. Those are the ones. hmm Um, so you'd think that would be the end of it, but like just a few years later in 1732, similar things start happening around the village again. And authorities waste like zero time humming and hawing. 11 bodies are disinterred. All, evidently, most, excuse me, all of them are evidently showing the same signs of decay as Pele. And by that, for them, that means none.
Well, yeah, because
Despite,
they were buried after him, so of course they would have less
right,
signs of decay.
right. Despite, well, this is just a few years later, but they're showing the same set of decay that we saw with Palais, the fresh blood in the cheeks, the whole bit, right? Some of them have been dead though for several months, but fresh blood is still found in their arteries and in their hearts. And of them, some do show signs of decomposition. One of the people who had died was a girl called Stenoska, and supposedly she had become terribly ill. And the very same night that she is said to have, quote, woke up screaming that a boy who suddenly and mysteriously died weeks before came to her in her bed and tried to strangle her. She dies the very same night she says this. So things aren't sitting well with the villagers, as you can imagine. And at this point, the Austrian military command hears about it and they get involved. They are fearing it's a possible epidemic. So, what do you do when you fear for a possible epidemic? You
Wall off
send
the
for an
entire
infection.
silly.
No, you send for an infectious disease specialist.
In the 1720s?
Yeah.
Wow.
His title is the Imperial Contagions Medicus Glacier. He just happens to be in a nearby town. So he visits Medvega and he shows up. He's investigating, but he doesn't find any signs of infectious disease and basically just kind of says it's all malnutrition. Like, get over it. Just figure out what you need to do to plant more crops or, we need to solve this problem, like your basic problem. This isn't a vampire problem. This is a lack of stew problem.
Right. You know what you need? More carbs.
Exactly. Yeah, you could go for some potatoes. Have you heard of Frederick the Great? Um, anyway, the villagers, they're hearing none of this because superstition and all that, and they insist it's vampires because, they've been there. They've seen what this looks like before, and so why wouldn't it be? So they call for the authorities to find and dispatch all the vampires, at which point Glacier agrees to exhume some of the bodies. Some of them are of the recently deceased are decomposed, but others who had died earlier had not begun to deteriorate, and they had blood in and around their mouths, similar to Pele. At this point, I'm fairly certain Glacier just throws his arms up and reports back that the villagers want the execution of the vampires, so do what you're gonna do. Like
Mm,
he doesn't see this as that being the problem, but he has to make his reports, right?
right.
So additionally, at this time, it's a bit of a news sensation. It's spreading like wildfire, and that is a bit problematic. So the sitting emperor of Austria, I believe it's Charles VI, orders an investigation into the matter. Enter regimental field surgeon Johann Fleckinger, along with two other officers and two additional military surgeons. They show up, and within like a few days, there are two more suspicious deaths, and again, the villagers start to dig up their dead and or, quote, earlier victims. They find the bodies pretty much as you would expect at this point in the story. Some even still have fresh blood in their organs and are said to have appeared younger than when they had died.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay. This is very New England vampire panic, even though that was after
Isn't it
this.
giving that? Right? Okay, so Fleckinger says in his official report that the bodies were, quote, das Vampirstand, or in a vampiric condition. In an interesting turn of events, the investigator discovered that all the dead had one thing in common: Palais. Additionally, it's believed that Palais also killed a few sheep, and given the socioeconomic conditions that they're living in, the villagers don't waste anything, so they eat the sheep he killed. Um, A woman called Stana at this time is said to have smeared what she thought was the blood of Palais on herself in the same way as he did, and she was one of the first ones to die in this round.
So maybe
Um,
it is an infectious disease, maybe a bloodborne illness, per se.
Maybe, right? There is a later individual who refers to it as a type of consumption, and I thought that was really interesting given we have these historical references in movies and whatnot, and I'm just going off movies. I'm not going off anything actually like substantial, but that, anytime someone has consumption, they're coughing up blood, right? Like, which I find that to be interesting. But anyway, it's at this point that Fleckinger says that everyone who has recently died must be dug up. In all, 40 bodies are disinterred.
No,
The
no, that is the
decomposed
wrong thing
bodies,
you want to do.
I agree with you, for multiple reasons. 40 are disinterred. The decomposed bodies are laid back in their graves to rest, but 17, they're in a preserved state, so they were staked, beheaded, and burned. And would you believe it? The mysterious deaths, they suddenly stop. Fleckinger writes up his final reports for the government. The report is actually called Visium et Repetrum, which means seen and discovered from 1732. At this point, the report is presented to the Austrian emperor, and it does the weirdest thing and becomes a bestseller, like all over Europe. And to me, that might be the most unhinged part of the story. But here we are, like Europeans are eating this up. And it's only like 1732, which is just wild to me. But like this stuff is selling like fresh coffees at twilight. You know, it's just what everybody wants to read. But by now, the Catholic Church has caught wind of all this, and they are less than pleased.
Yeah, I'm not
So,
surprised.
and me either, to be honest. According to beliefs at this time, Christians that are awaiting the resurrection that had been desecrated, that's making it impossible for them to get into heaven, which honestly really seems like a bad way to go since it's not technically the dead's fault. But anyway, so Cardinal Strattenbach, he's the Bishop of Omps. He requests that a specialist from the Catholic Church gets involved. And that specialist would be Giuseppe Davanzati. He's an archbishop of the Roman Catholic Church and a vampirologist.
Wow,
Van
what a
Helsing, is that
resume.
you? I know. How? I'm so excited to say that's a real job. That's all I'm saying. I am so excited to learn that's a real job. And this guy, Davanzetti, he has spent like years analyzing vampires and basically comes out and says that this is a result of human fantasy, likely of demonic origin. He then urges the Catholic Church to leave the bodies alone and to direct their attention to the people reporting vampirism because perhaps those individuals might need some spiritual guidance.
Even the vampirologist is not the one leading in. This is telling.
Right? Yeah, I had the same thoughts. Like when he is the one saying, "Hey, maybe we should just, I don't know, talk to the people accusing people." Like, can we start there?
Where was he during the
Um,
Salem witch trial? Because that's the kind of
a
energy we
child.
all needed.
Yeah, he was a child at the time. So on the other side of this conversation is a French Benedictine monk called Anton Augustin Calmet, and he basically wants everyone, from theologians to scholars to doctors, to actually give vampirism a serious thought and even consider the possibility that these bodies in other areas could be animated by demonic forces. Now, here is the part that I absolutely love. This kind of language volleys back and forth until Empress Maria Theresa of Austria, Marie
Yep.
Antoinette's mother, it comes across her desk, and she sends her personal physician, Gerard Van Swieten, to investigate the various claims. Now, Sweeten comes back and he concludes that the vampires don't exist, at which point Empress Maria Theresa passes a law that prohibits the opening or desecration of graves and bodies. Her laws would mark the end of the vampire epidemic, as well as essentially making witch trials impossible to hold. And I find that really interesting when you think about the fact that this is also the same woman who was known for kicking Jews out of the more populated areas of her territories and into the more remote regions. Um, we're making it impossible to hold these trials, but the Jews, they gotta go. Like,
You know, look, she's gonna make some good choices. She's gonna make some problematic ones, you know?
yeah, and I think it just again speaks to how nuanced every life is. Um, And I thought that was really interesting. And normally at this point, I would say, so that's the story of Arnold Paole, but it got me thinking about Maria Theresa and how other rulers in this time would have responded, right? Like this is the age of enlightenment. This is the age of all of these like really high profile, well-known rulers, and like the idea that this comes across somebody's desk. Like, can you imagine being Maria Theresa's secretary and saying at 10 o'clock you have a meeting with your advisors, at 11 o'clock you have tea with your third daughter-in-law, and then at noon I'm gonna need you to deal with this vampire problem in Serbia. Like, to me, that is just such a wild thought that that could be like a Tuesday afternoon for her. So I kind of started to. You look like you're gonna say something.
I mean, I now want to know the Pope's diary.
Same, right? Okay, so somewhere in his diary is probably something talking about our friend Dave and Zeddy. Like somewhere there's probably notes from him in there, right? Um, what's interesting though is I poked around a bit to try to see if I could come across any other European leaders that had to deal with a similar situation, or if they had any like, thoughts about it. But for the most part, even in 1728 to 1730, this isn't something that happens in the Western world. Like they may have heard about it, but they weren't worried about it. It wasn't something anybody had. Like you can't just Google what did you know, King Louis think. Like it just comes across as saying they probably thought they existed, but they dismissed them as myth. So then I started to think, okay, well, that makes sense because we're not dealing with vampires in the Western world at this point. We're still dealing with witch trials. So that was probably a more realistic thing to be looking for.
I
So I
thought we
started to
did have
think,
ancient vampires, though.
well, we did. And so that was where I was a little confused because at this point in French history, this is part of the folklore and like the mythology of their village people. So it's weird to me that this wasn't a more prevalent blame or issue amongst regular people, but it just doesn't come across any of their desks. So then I thought, I wonder if Catherine the Great, ever had to deal with this. And so I gave her a quick search, and what I got back is that because of her love for the Enlightenment, she would likely have just called it myth or superstition, and we don't have any direct quotes from her regarding vampirism or the vampire problem at all. So I guess if it doesn't happen in your territories, it doesn't happen and you don't worry about it.
You know what? I'm okay with that. That's how I would treat things too.
Yeah, if I don't know, but that works for me, you know? So there's my story of Arnold Paole and quite possibly the worst trip to Greece ever. The end.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I love all of this.
Wild, huh? Yep. And now you know why I couldn't find a great segue and just had to make a hard left turn.
No, because that all makes sense. Because how do you go from a possibly haunted house to that?
You're welcome.
Fair point.
Out here
Okay.
spreading chaos as best I can, just you.
Well, I know as we fully ramp up to Halloween, I've got a great story next week that I'm itching to tell Angie, and I am sitting on sources like you wouldn't believe. And if you are curious as to what fresh hell I am bringing, rate, review, subscribe, make sure that that download button is poised and ready so that this will be served up nicely to your inbox of podcasts so that you can start Friday in a way that'll be incredible.
Delightful.
And on that note, share us with your favorite vampirologist because apparently that's a job title.
I I have goals. Thanks, Van Helsing.
And on that note, goodbye.
Bye.